So let's talk about occupant loads. Basically, this just means how many people can safely use the space. It determines adequate exiting in an emergency. Your text uses the term egress, which is all about the exit path during an emergency. So the occupant load may be determined by using the load factor, which is given in the code, and we'll look at that here in a moment. And it can also work from the other end of the design process. If you know the desired number of occupants, then you can design the space to be large enough to meet that number. You need to remember that converging or common pathways must accommodate the entire sum of each load. So we're talking about a building with multiple occupancies, and say the lobby or the stairs or the corridors must be able to hold everyone from all of those spaces. So you have to add those occupants together. But it's very important to determine this, again, early in the design process, as it's going to guide further code use and decisions moving forward in the design process. So codes provide what are called load factors, and is the number of square feet required for each occupant. And page 89 in your book has a copy of the International Building Code table that has these load factors. There are two types of load numbers. One is gross, the other is net. Gross is the total, including spaces like corridors, closets, restrooms. Net is only the occupied spaces, removing those unoccupied spaces. So just a little difference there you'll want to pay attention to. But it's the amount of space that each person requires, including furniture and equipment. So for example, if we're talking about an office, then that square footage number is larger because you need a desk and a chair and filing or whatever. And again, remember, if it's the gross space, it includes circulation and any extra additional spaces as well. You would deduct the area for any built-ins or fixed items such as cabinets, shelving, fireplaces, if you think of things that are built in and take up space. So if you're one of those people that gets really stressed out over math, be at ease. This is a very simple load factor formula. If you have a calculator and can hit the divide button, you're in good shape. So the occupant load is simply the total floor area, and that's in square feet, divided by the load factor. So for example, a 3,000 square foot office has a total occupant load of 30. That's because 3,000 square feet is divided by the business load factor of 100 square feet per person. So 3,000 divided by 100 is 30. The load factor of 100, again, is based on the code that a business occupancy classification allows 100 square feet per person. Again, that's a gross area, and that would include desks and other business type furnishings, equipment that would be required. So you have some great examples in your textbook. There are two on page 90, so I encourage you to pause here, get out your book, and carefully read through those, write out the calculations to make sure you understand them as you go. Now, if you work through a calculation and determine that it's not going to fit the function of your project, you can typically change it and add more occupants, the requirement of additional exits, and then of course you have to get that approved. But check out the example of the restaurant discussed on page 92 for an example of this situation. Now let's talk about the different types of spaces. If there's a small area that exits through a primary area, the occupant totals are added together. So check out that floor plan on page 93. If you have a mixed or multiple occupancy, you calculate each separately and then you add those together. The example is on page 94. If a space can be transformed to different occupancy classes, use the one that would have the largest concentration of people. So again, we're always looking for kind of worst case scenario, the most people packed in, how can they get out safely in an emergency. If fixed seating is included, we might be talking booths in a restaurant or a theater. Rather than calculate the factor, you would want to count the seats. So in the case of continuous bench seating, you would allow 18 inches per person. For restaurant booth seating, you'd allow 24 inches per person. So use this method for parts of the space that would have fixed seating, and then add that to the calculation for the rest of the space. So check out the restaurant on page 96. So how do we use this information once we determine the occupant load? First of all, it's going to tell you how many exits are required per code, and then how wide those exit spaces need to be. And that's not just the door, but the corridor and the walkway leading up to the door. And then next, very important, it will tell us the number of plumbing fixtures that have to be included in bathrooms. So how frequently have you been frustrated standing in line to use the restroom? This would be the reason why. So those are the uses for the occupant load. And again, this chapter concludes with a checklist, so practice using that as you read through all the information in this chapter.